The USS Boxer is already moving. News looks right now, its hull is cutting through water at roughly 20 knots. Two other amphibious assault ships flanking it in formation, their flight decks loaded with MV-22 Osprey tiltrotors and CH-53E Super Stallions. Departing from their home port of San Diego, the three ships carry the 2,500 Marines of the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, KPTV, young men from Camp Pendleton who were told their destination is the Middle East, and nothing more specific than that. The officers briefing them don't know either. That's not a leak. That's the actual situation. And here's the thing, nobody is saying out loud inside the Pentagon right now, there is no plan. There are options. There are contingencies. There are war game simulations printed out on classified paper inside secure conference rooms in the E-ring. But a finalized, authorized, executable plan for what these 2,500 Marines are supposed to do when they arrive, that does not exist, not yet. And the clock is running. It is Saturday morning, March 21st, 2026. 21 days since the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran on February 28th. 21 days since the Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile-wide choke point between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, through which a fifth of the world's oil and other critical goods are transported, KPTV, began transforming from a global trade artery into a geopolitical weapon. And this morning, the weapon is still pointed at the entire planet's economy. Brent crude oil, the international standard, has soared during the fighting and was around $107 in morning trading on Friday, up more than 47% since the start of the war. KPTV 47% in 3 weeks. Here's what nobody is telling you about that number. The economists calling for controlled escalation or measured response are doing the math wrong. 47% in 3 weeks is not a spike. That's a structural shift. And it has a chain reaction baked into it that the average person won't feel for another 90 days. Not until the fertilizer made from sulfur that transited, the strait is gone. Not until the helium used to fabricate computer chips runs dry. Not until the quarterly earnings reports from South Korean and Japanese manufacturers start hitting zero. Key raw materials, like helium used in making computer chips and sulfur, a raw material and fertilizer, have been obstructed and could be in short supply soon, raising the prices of goods all the way down the supply chain. KPTV, if the strait stays closed for another 30 days, analysts are modeling oil at $180 per barrel. If it hits $180, the S&P 500 sheds 15% in the following 48 hours. Gas hits $9 at American pumps. Inflation, already the political wound that nearly broke every Western government over the last 4 years, comes roaring back with nothing to stop it. And all of that, every single domino, depends on what happens in a 21-mile-wide waterway on the other side of the Earth over the next 72 hours. And there's a third person in the room on this story, someone you haven't heard about yet, someone who is not Trump, not Netanyahu, not Aragshi. Someone who is physically present in a location right now that changes the entire equation of what happens next. Hold that name. You'll need it. As the conflict enters a more dangerous phase, the deployment raises more questions about possible ground troops or missions tied to the Strait of Hormuz. Military. Calm. But let's be precise about what dangerous phase actually means in 2026. Signal number 1, this is the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Unit the Pentagon has dispatched to the region since the conflict began. A 2,500-strong Marine unit accompanied by the USS Tripoli warship launched from Japan, China Pulse, and that unit is already in transit through the Indian Ocean. Satellite imagery from commercial providers picked up the USS Tripoli's position in the southern Indian Ocean, close to India's maritime exclusion zone. The USS Tripoli carries troops from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, based in Okinawa, Japan, trained for rapid deployment, including amphibious operations, raids, and air-ground combat. The ship is equipped with F-35 stealth fighter jets, MV-22 Osprey helicopters, and landing craft for moving troops ashore. Business today, F-35s. On an amphibious ship. That's not a defensive posture. F-35s don't escort tankers. F-35s suppress air defenses. F-35s fly into denied airspace and kill what's hiding inside it. The 31st MEU plus F-35s plus a former cargo bay now packed with landing craft means exactly one thing. Someone is at minimum planning for the possibility of going ashore on Iranian soil. Now add the 11th MEU aboard the USS Boxer Group, steaming up from San Diego. Retired Army General James A. Spider Marks, a military analyst, put it simply, "You'll need to create a buffer zone on the ground if it's determined that airstrikes do not sufficiently decrease Iran's ability to fire onto traffic transiting the straits. That's why Marines are en route. It's a contingency force. MS now, a contingency force. That phrase is doing enormous work right now. Because the public statement from the White House is still the same 3 words it's been since day one, no ground troops. Trump said it again on Thursday. I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you. And that sentence, if you listen to it carefully, is not a denial. It is a threat wrapped inside a denial, wrapped inside a press conference answer. I certainly wouldn't tell you. Meaning the information is active and controlled. Meaning the decision is live. The Trump administration has been strategizing methods and options to secure or extract Iran's nuclear materials, according to multiple people briefed on the discussions, as the U.S. Israel-led military campaign against Tehran enters a more uncertain phase. CBS News, secure or extract. 2 words. Enormous operational difference. Secure means you bomb the facility and collapse the tunnel system so the material is inaccessible. Extract means you send people in. You send people in with radiation suits and canisters and security details. You send people in who can die. More than 950 pounds of highly enriched uranium is believed to remain, much of it buried under damaged facilities. Business today. 950 pounds. That's approximately 430 kilograms of material that, under different manufacturing conditions, represents multiple nuclear devices. The facilities it was stored in have been struck by American B-2 Spirit bombers carrying GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, 30,000-pound bunker busters designed specifically to kill hardened underground infrastructure. But struck does not mean destroyed, and damaged facility does not mean inaccessible material. And this is precisely why there is a very specific type of special operations unit, whose name has not appeared anywhere in the public reporting, that is already staging in a country adjacent to Iran. That's the 3rd person in the room. Not a person. A unit, and we'll come back to it. U.S. and Israeli leaders have said that weeks of strikes have decimated Iran's military. Airstrikes have also killed its supreme leader, the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, and a raft of other top-ranking military and political leaders. KPTV, and here's the catch that nobody is telling you. Killing the supreme leader did not end the war. Killing the intelligence minister, whose funeral was held on Friday in Tehran, his wife and daughter buried alongside him, a procession that drew tens of thousands into the streets, did not end the war. Iran has showed it is still capable of attacks that are choking off oil supplies and scrambling the global economy. KPTV, this is the central tactical mystery of the 3rd week. The command structure has been shattered. The Navy, according to Netanyahu on Thursday, is sunk. The Air Force is in tatters. And yet, on Friday morning, Iranian missiles were hitting residential neighborhoods in Petah Tikva, east of Tel Aviv, and Iranian drones launched by Hezbollah from Lebanon were filling the skies over northern Israel simultaneously. A CBS News producer in Tel Aviv said there were almost non-stop missiles from Iran towards all districts on Friday, as well as new drone launches by Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. CBS News almost non-stop, with a Navy that sunk, with an Air Force in tatters. The IRGC's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard disputed Netanyahu's claims. KPTV. Their spokesman, General Ali Mohammed Naini, was quoted directly in Iran's state-run newspaper. "We are producing missiles even during war conditions, which is amazing, and there is no particular problem in stockpiling." CBS News. Think about that sentence for a moment. Iran's government is not just denying defeat. It is publicly announcing production capability. It is sending a message not to Washington. Washington already knows, but to its own domestic population and to every nervous intermediary in the Gulf who is watching this war and calculating which side to quietly align with. Iran is saying, "We have not broken. We are building. Keep watching." But here's what nobody is telling you about the IRGC spokesman's statement. The factories he's describing, the ones producing missiles even during war conditions, are not the large, tracked, above-ground installations that GPS-guided munitions can find and strike. They are dispersed, underground, mobile. Iran has spent 30 years and hundreds of billions of dollars specifically preparing for an American air campaign. Jason H. Campbell, a senior fellow on defense and security issues at the Middle East Institute, said U.S. forces would need to take control of the Iranian coastline bordering the strait and create a buffer zone, predicting that Iranian forces would fire drones and missiles at ships from mountainous areas that border the strait, and that Iranian drones could also be fired from further inside Iran. They have been planning for this for decades. Iran is masterful at asymmetric warfare, and they are shrewd about taking advantage of the geographic gift that was the Strait of Hormuz. MS. Now a geographic gift, the Zagros mountain range runs directly along Iran's southern coastline. You cannot fly a tanker through a mountain. You cannot bomb a missile team that is already behind a ridgeline, launching and moving, launching and moving. The U.S. Air Force has the most sophisticated aerial surveillance network in the history of warfare, and it still cannot locate and destroy every mobile missile launcher inside an area the size of Texas before the next salvo is fired. This is why the Marines are moving. This is why, behind every public statement about no ground troops, there are classified PowerPoint presentations inside CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa, Florida, outlining exactly what it would take to physically clear the southern Iranian coastline to a depth of 40 kilometers and create the buffer zone that Campbell is describing. The problem, and this is where it gets complicated in ways that no one in Washington is admitting publicly, is that the Marines who would do it would face exactly the threat that Campbell describes. Dispersed Iranian militia units, armed with cornets and Tufan anti-tank missiles, hiding in the Hajar Mountains and in the fishing villages that dot the coastline between Bandar Abbas and the Omani border. The first ground engagement on Iranian soil would not look like a conventional battle. It would look like Fallujah in a mountain range with a minefield underneath it. But here's the catch. The Strait of Hormuz scenario isn't actually the most dangerous thing on the table this Saturday morning. The Trump administration is considering plans to occupy or blockade Iran's Karg Island, a small island in the Persian Gulf 15 miles off Iran's coast that handles roughly 90% of its crude oil exports, to pressure Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, according to 4 sources with knowledge of the issue. Axios 90% of Iran's oil exports run through one island, 15 miles from shore, sitting in the middle of the Persian Gulf. Deep enough water around it to dock supertankers, and the Trump administration has already struck it. Trump announced last week that U.S. Central Command completed one of the most powerful bombing raids in the history of the Middle East when it totally obliterated military targets on Iran's Karg Island. NPR military targets only, oil infrastructure untouched. And this is signal number 2. You don't carefully preserve the oil infrastructure on an island you're planning to bomb into oblivion. You preserve the oil infrastructure on an island you're planning to occupy and use. A source with knowledge of White House thinking put the internal logic simply, we need about a month to weaken the Iranians more with strikes, take the island, and then get them by the balls and use it for negotiations. Axios, get them by the balls. That is the actual phrase being used by administration insiders to describe the endgame strategy for one of the most consequential foreign policy operations in American history since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And the senior official speaking it isn't wrong about the leverage. If the U.S. takes Karg Island, Iran's oil revenue, which funds everything from the IRGC's missile production to the proxy militia networks in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, collapses almost immediately. Karg Island handles about 90% of Iran's oil exports, and Iran has been exporting roughly 5 million barrels of oil per day, mostly to China, Fox News China. Here's where the domino sequence becomes genuinely dangerous at a systemic level. China is the primary buyer of Iranian crude. Iran charges below market prices. China uses the savings to subsidize its own manufacturing sector. If Iranian crude stops flowing to China, because a U.S. Marine force is sitting on Karg Island, China faces an immediate energy cost shock that ripples directly into its export sector, its trade surplus, and its internal political stability calculations. And China has been making quiet decisions over the past 3 weeks that nobody in Washington has officially acknowledged. Several CNN sources have reported that the United States has intelligence information indicating that China may be providing financial assistance and missile parts and components to Iran. Pravda, USA. If that intelligence is accurate, and the U.S. government believes it is, then the Karg Island operation doesn't just mean war with Iran. It potentially means a direct economic and covert confrontation with Beijing. Trump wanted to be in China at the end of March for trade talks. That trip has already been postponed. The crisis in the Strait compelled him to postpone his planned trip to China and continue the war longer than he'd planned, two sources with knowledge said. Axios. This war is already breaking the diplomatic architecture that the Trump team spent his first 2 months in office carefully constructing. And now the Marines are on ships, and Karg Island is sitting there with its oil pipelines intact, and Beijing is watching every movement of every American hull in the Persian Gulf in real time via its surveillance satellite network. Iran is blocking Gulf countries from exporting their oil while allowing tankers picking up Iranian crude to pass freely, keeping its own oil flowing to China and other countries. Axios. This is the most underreported strategic detail of the entire conflict. Iran has not closed the strait. Iran has weaponized the strait. There is a critical difference. A closed strait is a crisis. A weaponized strait is leverage. Iran is selectively permitting transit based on allegiance. A growing number of ships have been rerouting via Iran's territorial waters, suggesting that Tehran is allowing permission-based transits to friendly countries. Maritime analyst Michelle Weiza-Bachmann noted, Western-affiliated vessels won't voluntarily come into Iranian waters, but likely Chinese, Indian, and others will. Al Jazeera Iran has effectively created a toll road with missiles. Pay the fee, or simply fly the right flag, and you get through. One tanker operator reportedly paid $2 million for safe passage, according to the Financial Times. $2 million. To a government the U.S. government calls a terrorist regime. And tanker operators are paying it because the alternative is their ship either sitting idle in the Gulf of Oman burning fuel for weeks, or attempting a transit without authorization and risking a drone strike. Here's what nobody is telling you about the permission-based transit system. It is more politically destabilizing for Washington than a complete closure would be. A complete closure would have unified every oil-importing nation on Earth behind U.S. efforts to reopen the strait. The selective closure instead created a divided world. China and India and certain other nations quietly threading ships through Iranian-controlled waters and saying nothing publicly, while Trump calls European NATO allies cowards for not sending warships to help. Trump lambasted America's closest allies on Friday, dismissing the 7-decade-old NATO alliance as a paper tiger without the U.S. military, and calling its other members cowards for not meeting his demands to send forces to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. CBS News. And here's the internal friction that is defining this conflict in week 3. Netanyahu is not just an ally. Netanyahu is a co-belligerent with his own strategic objectives, and those objectives do not always align with Washington's. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Thursday that Israel would hold off on any further attacks on Iran's giant natural gas field at U.S. President Donald Trump's request. CBS News Trump asked. Netanyahu complied. But complied is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Israeli intelligence has publicly stated that Israel's interceptor missile stockpile is critically depleted. American officials are saying that Israel entered this war already with a lack of means to intercept ballistic missiles. Pravda USA. A depleted Iron Dome and David's Sling interceptor inventory, while Iran is still firing near continuous volleys at Israeli population centers, is not a sustainable military posture. And Netanyahu knows that the fastest way to replenish that inventory and the fastest way to get U.S. attention fully focused on Iran, rather than on managing the diplomatic fallout, is to do something escalatory. The IRGC has vowed to pursue and kill child killer Netanyahu. CNBC. That threat is also a gift to Netanyahu politically. No Israeli prime minister declines when the enemy publicly vows to assassinate him. It locks him into a posture of maximum retaliation. And the internal friction on the Iranian side is just as volatile, just as structurally dangerous. With little information coming out of Iran, it was not clear who was truly in charge of the country. KPTV. The Supreme Leader is dead. The Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council is dead. The Intelligence Minister is buried. The chain of command inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which controls the missile batteries, controls the naval mines, controls the proxy networks, is now operating in a partially decapitated, partially autonomous state. That's not reassuring. A fully commanded adversary is predictable. An adversary operating on partially autonomous unit-level decision-making in a high-stress environment with dispersed weapon systems is the most dangerous possible military opponent. It means no single decision-maker can tell the missile batteries to stand down. It means the deal, if a deal is being considered, has to reach every autonomous commander simultaneously, and that is operationally nearly impossible. Iran on Friday threatened to target recreational and tourist sites around the world. General Abulfazl Shakarchi warned that parks, recreational areas, and tourist destinations worldwide won't be safe for enemies of Tehran, renewing concerns that it may revert to using militant attacks beyond the Middle East as a pressure tactic. CBS News, recreational and tourist sites. This is Iran's version of asymmetric deterrence against domestic populations in allied countries. It is designed not to start a war with France or Japan or South Korea. It is designed to start a political argument inside France, Japan, and South Korea between citizens who want to get involved and citizens who do not. It is Iran attempting to export its domestic political costs across the Atlantic and the Pacific. And it is working, at least partially, which is why Trump's Hormuz coalition, the multinational flotilla he has been trying to assemble for 10 days, has yet to see a single country publicly commit, even as a senior administration official says Trump expects some to announce support this week. Axios. Here's the catch that flips the entire narrative on its head. Trump, on Friday evening, posted to Truth Social that the U.S. was considering winding down its military operations. He wrote, "We are getting very close to meeting our objectives as we consider winding down our great military efforts in the Middle East with respect to the terrorist regime of Iran." He listed objectives, including preventing Iran from getting close to nuclear capability, completely degrading Iran's missile capabilities and launchers, and eliminating Iran's Navy and Air Force. CBS News, winding down. At the exact moment, 3 warships are leaving San Diego. At the exact moment, the administration is actively wargaming the seizure of Karg Island. At the exact moment, classified briefings about extracting 430 kilograms of enriched uranium are happening inside secure compartments in the West Wing. This is not a contradiction. This is negotiation. The winding down post is a message, sent not to the American public, not to NATO allies, but to the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Because Araghchi has been the one consistent, present, communicating figure on the Iranian side throughout this entire conflict. While the command structure has been devastated, Araghchi has appeared on CBS News, on Al Jazeera, on Iranian state media, consistently delivering a calibrated message. He said during negotiations with the U.S. before the conflict broke out, Iran was offering to dilute its highly enriched uranium, and then the next thing they knew, there was an attack. Al Jazeera. And this is the secret offer that defined the 48 hours before February 28th. Iran was at the table. Iran was offering to dilute, not eliminate, dilute, it's a 60% enriched uranium stockpile. And then the bombs fell. Araghchi has been telling this story in every interview. He is not telling it for historical purposes. He is telling it as a signal that there is a path back to the table, if Washington is willing to acknowledge that the table existed. On February 25th, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that a historic agreement with the United States to avert military conflict was within reach, ahead of renewed talks in Geneva. Wikipedia. 3 days later, the war started. Now, here's what officials are saying privately. Those Geneva talks produced a document, an informal framework. Not a treaty, not a joint statement, a working document that outlined the parameters of what a deal could look like. That document still exists. It is in Araghchi's briefcase, metaphorically speaking. And the reason the winding down Truth Social post matters is that it is the first public signal from the Trump side that it acknowledges the war has an endpoint that is not regime collapse and is not full nuclear dismantlement on American terms. Trump is an exceptional negotiator, and exceptional negotiators always tell the other side what they want to hear right before they present the leverage that makes the deal irresistible. The leverage is the Karg Island option. The internal White House, thinking, according to a senior administration official, he wants Hormuz open. If he has to take Karg Island to make it happen, that's going to happen. If he decides to have a coastal invasion, that's going to happen, but that decision hasn't been made. Axios. This is the message being transmitted through every channel available, through the movement of the USS Boxer, through the satellite images of the USS Tripoli in the Indian Ocean, through the White House official who told CBS News flatly that the U.S. military can take out Karg Island at any time. CBS News. The Americans are saying, we have not played our final card. The Marines are the final card. And we are shuffling them toward the table. Now back to the third person in the room. There's a unit, not publicly identified, not disclosed in any of the official reporting, that specializes in what the military calls sensitive site exploitation. These are teams trained specifically to enter a location after it has been struck by conventional munitions, assess what is inside, secure weapons-grade material, and either destroy it in place or physically remove it. The Trump administration has been strategizing about how to secure or extract Iran's nuclear materials, according to multiple people briefed on the discussions. CBS News. The word extract is not used casually in military planning. Extract means a physical operation. Extract means boots inside a hardened bunker somewhere in Iran's nuclear architecture. Extract means a team, small, specialized, moving fast, going into a location that has been bombed and is structurally compromised and may be radiologically contaminated, and coming back out with material that cannot fall into hands that will move it through a courier network to a port in the Gulf of Oman. That team or teams are staging right now, and their operation, if it is ordered, would be the most operationally complex intelligence military hybrid mission since the raid on Abbottabad in 2011. Maritime historian and professor Sal Mercogliano at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy put it plainly. Ship captains waiting to cross the strait have not heard any specific plans from the U.S. military. They just want security. Now the tanker captains are floating. Billions of dollars of crude oil sitting in VLCCs, very large crude carriers, at anchor in the Gulf of Oman, burning fuel, accruing demurrage costs, waiting for someone to give them a safe transit corridor. The U.S. Navy has said it could escort them, but escort inside a body of water that is 21 miles wide at its narrowest, lined with Iranian coastal defense missile batteries on one shore, requires either that those batteries have been destroyed or that the escorts are willing to absorb a hit. Several vessels have reported damage while transiting the area, forcing shipping companies to reassess routes through one of the world's most strategically sensitive energy corridors. Military. Com insurance premiums for tanker transit have moved from standard marine risk to war zone level pricing. Some former military officials and maritime experts say the U.S. government may need to guarantee coverage for the cost of damage for any tanker attacked to persuade ship owners to send them through. Now the U.S. government guaranteeing tanker insurance. The last time that kind of direct commercial military integration happened was Operation Earnest Will in 1987, when Reagan reflagged Kuwaiti tankers as American vessels to protect them from Iranian attacks. That operation lasted 14 months and killed 37 American sailors aboard the USS Stark. History is not repeating, but it is rhyming in ways that should make every decision-maker in Washington acutely uncomfortable. The UK has given specific permission for the US to use its bases to launch strikes on Iranian missile sites, capabilities being used to attack ships in the Strait of Hormuz, CBS News according to a statement from UK Prime Minister Starmer's office released Friday. Diego Garcia, RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. The British base network gives American strike aircraft, B-1B Lancers, F-15Es, EA-18G Growlers conducting electronic warfare, multiple vectors of approach that reduce response time and complicate Iranian targeting solutions. An EA-18G Growler, attached to Electronic Attack Squadron 133, launched from the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Persian Gulf in support of Operation Epic Fury, March 6, 2026. Military. COM, Operation Epic Fury. That's the name. And 3 weeks in, the operation has achieved significant tactical successes. Degraded command and control, eliminated key leadership, struck naval assets. But the strategic objective, a reopened Strait of Hormuz, a functioning global energy market, a cessation of Iranian missile fire, has not been achieved. And the gap between tactical success and strategic failure is where wars get extended, where escalation ladders get climbed, and where decisions made in the next 72 hours will echo for decades. The economic stakes are mounting. Iran's attacks on Gulf energy sites, along with its pressure on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, have rattled global markets. Newslook's Washington is not only reacting to battlefield events, it is trying to stabilize a region whose disruption can quickly hit global prices and supply chains. Asia is getting hit the hardest. Most of the oil and gas exiting the Strait of Hormuz is transported there. But the price shocks are reverberating throughout the world economy. KPTV Japan, which imports virtually all of its energy, is watching the USS Tripoli, loaded with Japanese-based Marines from Okinawa, steam toward the Persian Gulf, and quietly calculating whether its own defense commitments and its energy survival are actually in alignment. South Korea is doing the same math. India, which has been threading tankers through Iranian permission-based transit, is caught between its energy needs and its strategic partnership with Washington. And China, which is now suspected of supplying missile components to the country whose missiles are killing this global energy market. China is watching all of it and saying nothing. President Trump on Friday declared the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran militarily won, saying there was very little danger for them in the region, despite ongoing Iranian missile and drone strikes. CBS News and Iran, on that same Friday, was firing near-continuous missile and drone salvos at Israeli cities and threatening tourist destinations worldwide. Both things are simultaneously true, and that is the paradox of Week 3. The United States has achieved military dominance over Iranian conventional forces. Iran has achieved strategic leverage over the global economy. These two facts are not in contradiction. They are the actual shape of modern asymmetric conflict. A senior administration official confirmed the president is not going to wait around and let the Iranians dictate the pace of the conflict. Axios. That sentence is the key to the next 72 hours. Trump doesn't wait. His entire political identity, his entire negotiating philosophy is built around being the one who controls tempo. Letting a war drag into week 4 without a visible breakthrough, without a reopened strait, without a ceasefire framework, without some kind of visible win he can post on Truth Social, is politically untenable for a president who campaigned on strength and decisiveness. The Karg Island operation becomes more likely with every day the strait stays closed. The Marines become less of a contingency and more of a first wave with every passing tide. And so we arrive at the binary, not as a rhetorical device, as an actual live decision that exists in the Oval Office right now. The next 72 hours produce one of two outcomes. Option 1, Aragchi's back-channel signal. The implicit reference to the Geneva framework, the dilution offer, the winding down Truth Social post, produces a message through an intermediary that constitutes the beginning of a genuine ceasefire negotiation. The Marines slow their transit. The USS Boxer's deployment timeline is quietly extended. Oil drops $15 a barrel on the rumor of talks alone. The world inhales. Option 2, no message comes. Or the message that comes is what Aragchi has said publicly. We never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiations. Pravda, USA. In that case, the Karg Island seizure order comes U.S. A-10. Warthogs are already hunting Iranian fast attack craft in the Strait of Hormuz. Army recognition. B-2 Spirit bombers return to airspace they know well. The USS Boxer's landing craft lower into the Persian Gulf. 2,500 Marines go ashore on an island 15 miles off the Iranian coast. And the war that was supposed to end before Trump's China trip, the war that has already killed more than 2,000 people, mostly in Iran, enters a phase from which there is no clean exit. Peace or war. Deal or ground troops. A late-night back-channel message from Tehran that changes everything. Or a dawn launch order that changes everything differently. The 2,500 Marines of the 11th MEU don't know which one it's going to be. Neither does anyone in the Pentagon. Neither does anyone in the West Wing. And right now, on this Saturday morning, with the USS Boxer cutting through ocean swells 3,000 miles from the Strait of Hormuz, that is the most dangerous truth of all.